Ladies and gentlemen, what if the moment you are about to give up is the exact moment your life is about to change? What if the door that has refused to open for years is not locked, but waiting for you to become strong enough to push it? And what if the pain you are experiencing right now is not evidence that you have been forgotten by life, but evidence that something inside you is being forged? Think about that, because there will come a moment in your life when everything in you will whisper, enough. Not because you are weak, not because you are lazy, not because you are incapable, but because you are human. There will be mornings when getting out of bed feels like an act of courage. There will be nights when you stare at the ceiling and wonder whether any of your effort has mattered. There will be moments when you look at other people and think, they are moving forward while I am standing still. You will watch someone else receive the opportunity you prayed for. You will see someone else succeed at the dream you have been fighting for. You will send an application and hear nothing. You will build something and watch it fail. You will love someone and lose them. You will trust someone and discover that they were not worthy of your trust. You will give your best and still come in second. You will sacrifice and sometimes wonder whether anyone even noticed. And in those moments, a dangerous voice will appear inside your mind. It will say, maybe this is not for you. It will say, maybe you should quit. It will say, maybe you are not good enough. It will say, maybe you have wasted enough time. And if you listen long enough, you may begin to believe it. But today, I want to tell you something that may change the way you look at your struggle forever. The voice telling you to quit is not always the voice of truth. Sometimes it is simply the voice of exhaustion. Sometimes it is the voice of fear. Sometimes it is the voice of an old identity that has become terrified of the person you are becoming. There is a strange thing about human beings. We often say we want transformation, but when transformation begins, we become frightened by it. We say we want a new life, but we become uncomfortable when the old life starts falling apart. We say we want strength, but strength rarely arrives wearing the clothes we expected. Strength may arrive as rejection. Strength may arrive as loneliness. Strength may arrive as failure. Strength may arrive as uncertainty. Strength may arrive in the form of a season when nothing seems to make sense. And because we expected strength to feel powerful, we do not recognize it when it arrives disguised as pain. But pain has a language. Failure has a language. Loss has a language. And sometimes the deepest suffering in your life is asking you a question. Who are you when the thing you depended upon disappears? Who are you when the applause stops? Who are you when nobody believes in you? Who are you when the relationship ends? Who are you when the money disappears? Who are you when the opportunity is taken away? Who are you when your plans collapse? Who are you when you have no evidence that tomorrow will be better? That is where you meet yourself. Not the version of yourself that performs for the world. Not the version that smiles when everything is going well. Not the version that tells everyone, I am fine. You meet the deeper self, The self that has been buried underneath expectations, under fear, under comparison, under approval, under the need to be understood. And sometimes, your greatest battle is not against the world. It is against the part of yourself that has learned to believe you are smaller than you really are. That is why you must never give up. But understand what I mean by that. Never giving up does not mean you will never cry. It does not mean you will never feel afraid. It does not mean you will never question yourself. It does not mean you will never rest. It does not mean you will never change your strategy. It does not mean you will keep walking toward a wall, simply because you promised yourself you would never turn around. No, never giving up means something deeper. It means that even when you change the path, you do not abandon the purpose. It means that even when one dream dies, you refuse to believe that your life has no meaning. It means that when life knocks you down, you allow yourself to feel the ground beneath you. But you do not build your home there. You get back up, maybe slowly, maybe shaking, maybe wounded, maybe without confidence, but you get back up because your life is not defined by the number of times you fall. Your life is defined by what you choose to do after the fall. There is something within every human being that wants to move toward wholeness. Something that wants to grow. Something that wants to become. Something that refuses to remain trapped forever inside yesterday's identity. And perhaps the greatest tragedy is not failure. The greatest tragedy is reaching the end of your life and discovering that you spent your entire existence trying to become someone acceptable to everyone except yourself. You were afraid to begin because people might laugh. You were afraid to speak because people might disagree. You were afraid to love because you might get hurt. You were afraid to dream because you might fail. You were afraid to fail because people might judge you. So you stayed where it was safe. And years passed. Listen to me carefully. Safety is not always safety. Sometimes what you call safety is simply a cage with comfortable furniture. Sometimes your comfort zone is not protecting you. It is imprisoning you. You tell yourself, I am waiting for the right time. But sometimes you are not waiting. You are hiding. You tell yourself, I need more confidence. But sometimes confidence does not come before action. Confidence is created by action. You tell yourself, I will start when I know exactly what I am doing. But nobody who has ever built an extraordinary life knew everything at the beginning. They began with uncertainty. They began with questions. They began with imperfect knowledge. They began while afraid. And then they learned. You do not need to see the entire staircase. You need enough courage to take the next step. That is all. The next step. Not the next 1,000 steps. Not the next 10 years. The next step. Because when you are standing in darkness, demanding that life show you the entire road before you move, is a perfect way to remain exactly where you are. Sometimes the road reveals itself only after you begin walking. Think about a person standing at the edge of a forest at night. They have a small lantern. The lantern does not illuminate the entire forest. It may illuminate only a few meters. But if the person walks those few meters, the light moves with them. Then another few meters appear, then another, then another. That is how life often works. You do not receive the entire map. You receive enough light for the next step. And your responsibility is not to know everything. Your responsibility is to keep moving. There was a time in your life when you could not do many of the things you now do effortlessly. You could not speak the way you speak. You could not walk the way you walk. You could not solve the problems you solve today. You learned, you failed, you tried, again, you fell, you stood, you repeated. And somehow, without realizing it, you became someone who could do what once seemed impossible. Do not forget that. The person you are today was once a stranger to the person you were. And the person you are becoming may currently feel like a stranger too. That is okay. Growth is supposed to feel unfamiliar. You are not supposed to recognize every version of yourself immediately. There will be seasons when you feel lost. But being lost and being finished are not the same thing. Ride that again in your heart. Being lost is not being finished. Sometimes, you must lose your old direction before you discover your deeper direction. Sometimes, you must lose the person you thought you were before you discover who you actually are. Sometimes, life dismantles your plans because your plans were too small for the person you were becoming. And I know that sounds beautiful when spoken from a stage. But I also know that when you are living through it, it does not feel beautiful. It feels brutal. It feels unfair. It feels personal. You ask, why me? You ask, why now? You ask, what did I do to deserve this? And perhaps the better question is not always, why is this happening to me? Perhaps sometimes the question is, what is this trying to awaken in me? What strength is this demanding from me? What illusion is this removing? What fear is this forcing me to confront? What part of myself have I avoided for too long? What truth have I refused to see? Because suffering can destroy you if you only experience it. But suffering can transform you if you also understand it. There is a difference. Pain without reflection can become bitterness. Pain with reflection can become wisdom. Rejection can become resentment. Or rejection can become redirection. Failure can become shame. Or failure can become education. Loss can become emptiness. Or loss can teach you what truly matters. You cannot always control what happens to you, but you can participate in what happens within you. That is where your power begins. And this is why you must stop measuring your life only by visible results. You plant a seed underground, and for a long time, nothing appears to happen. If you judged the seed by what your eyes could see, you would call it a failure. But beneath the surface, something is happening. Roots are forming. Structure is developing. Preparation is taking place. The silence is not proof of inactivity. Sometimes, your greatest growth is invisible. You may be becoming more disciplined, more patient, more courageous, more emotionally mature, more aware, more capable of standing alone, more capable of saying no, more capable of surviving disappointment, more capable of recognizing what is not meant for you. And perhaps you are looking at your life, saying nothing is happening, when in reality, everything is happening beneath the surface. Do not uproot the seed, because you cannot yet see the tree. Do not abandon the dream simply because the evidence has not arrived on your schedule. Do not confuse delay with denial, and do not confuse silence with absence. There are seasons of your life when the greatest work is happening, where nobody can see it. Nobody applauds you for resisting temptation. Nobody gives you a trophy for getting out of bed when your heart is broken. Nobody celebrates the private battle fought last night. Nobody knows how many times you almost quit. But you know, and that matters, because there is a version of courage that requires an audience. And there is another kind of courage that exists when nobody is watching. The second kind is deeper. You may not be able to control whether the world recognizes your struggle, but you can decide whether you will honor it by continuing. Imagine a boxer who gets knocked down. The crowd sees the fall. But the true battle is happening inside the boxer. There is a moment when the body says, "Stay down." There is a moment when the mind says, "It is over." But somewhere beneath the pain, a decision is made. One knee, then the other. Then the hand reaches for the rope, and the person stands. That moment is more important than the applause, because the person who stands after being knocked down is not the same person who entered the fight. They have learned something. They have discovered something. They have met a version of themselves that they did not know existed. And that is what adversity can do. It introduces you to yourself. You think you know how strong you are until life gives you a reason to find out. You think you know how patient you are until the answer takes longer than expected. You think you know how courageous you are until fear becomes louder than your dream. You think you know what you believe until everything you believed is tested. Adversity is not always a punishment. Sometimes it is an initiation, a passage, a confrontation between who you have been and who you must become. And I want you to think about the person you would become if you stopped running from difficulty. Imagine if you stopped interpreting every obstacle as a sign to quit. Imagine if you stopped saying, "This is too hard," and started saying, "This is making me stronger." Imagine if every rejection became information, every failure became instruction, every delay became preparation, every criticism became an opportunity to examine yourself without surrendering your identity. Every difficult season became training. Your life would change, not because the world suddenly became easier, but because you became harder to defeat. That is the goal, not to create a life where nothing hurts. Create a self that can walk through pain without losing its soul. Because you will not always be able to control the storm, but you can learn how to stand in it. You can learn how to breathe while the wind is screaming. You can learn how to continue when certainty disappears. You can learn that fear does not have to be absent for courage to exist. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is action in the presence of fear. And perhaps the greatest lie you have believed is that you must feel ready before you begin. You may never feel ready. Do it anyway. You may never feel confident. Move anyway. You may never feel certain. Take the step anyway. You may never receive permission. Give yourself permission. There is a moment in every person's life when they have to stop asking the world, "Do you think I can?" and start asking themselves, "What am I willing to become?" That question changes everything, because you cannot always control whether you win, but you can control whether you grow. You cannot always control whether someone chooses you, but you can choose yourself. You cannot always control whether the opportunity comes, but you can prepare until the opportunity finds you ready. You cannot control whether someone understands your vision, but you can refuse to abandon it simply because they cannot see it. Your dream does not need universal approval. Your purpose does not require a unanimous vote. Some of the most important things you will ever do will be misunderstood by people who were never meant to understand them. And that is okay. Not everyone is going to see what you see. Not everyone will believe what you believe. Not everyone will understand why you keep trying. Some people will call your persistence foolish. Some will call your ambition unrealistic. Some will remind you of every time you failed. Some will laugh. Some will doubt you. And sometimes the most painful criticism will come from people you love. But listen carefully. Their doubt is not your destiny. Their fear is not your future. Their limitations are not your limitations. You can love people without letting their fears become your identity. You can respect their opinions without surrendering your direction. And you can listen to criticism without allowing criticism to become your prison. There is a difference between humility and self-abandonment. Humility says, "I may be wrong. Let me learn." Self-abandonment says, "I must become someone else so everyone will approve of me." Never confuse the two. Learn, adapt, improve, but do not disappear. Because there is something sacred about becoming fully yourself, not the version of yourself that society demanded, not the version your parents imagined, not the version your friends expect, not the version social media rewards, the real you, the imperfect you, the evolving you, the you who has scars, the you who has made mistakes, the you who has regrets, the you who has dreams you are almost afraid to admit, the you who still has work to do. That person is worthy of being developed. And you cannot develop yourself if you spend your entire life hiding from yourself. There will be things inside you that you do not like: anger, jealousy, fear, insecurity, pride, shame, regret. Do not pretend they are not there. Look at them, understand them, bring them into consciousness. Because what you refuse to face will eventually control you. The shadow you ignore does not disappear. It waits. It influences your choices from the darkness. It makes you react instead of respond. It makes you sabotage opportunities. It makes you push away the people you love. It makes you quit before anyone else has the chance to reject you. So when fear says, "Give up," do not immediately obey. Ask fear a question. What are you protecting me from? Maybe fear is protecting you from embarrassment. Maybe from rejection. Maybe from disappointment. Maybe from failure. And then ask another question. What will it cost me if I let this fear make my decisions? That question is powerful, because fear often promises to protect you from pain while quietly stealing your future. It says, Do not try, and you will not fail. But it forgets to mention, if you do not try, you may spend years wondering what could have happened. It says, do not love, and you will not get hurt. But it forgets to mention, if you never love, you may also never experience the depth of connection you are capable of. It says, do not dream, and you cannot be disappointed. But it forgets to mention, a life without disappointment may also become a life without expansion. Fear wants certainty. Life does not offer certainty. Life offers possibility, and possibility requires risk. You must be willing to risk being uncomfortable, risk being misunderstood, risk failing, risk starting over, risk hearing no, because the opposite of failure is not success. The opposite of failure is often surrender. And surrender can happen long before you physically stop moving. You can surrender while still going to work. You can surrender while still smiling. You can surrender while still appearing successful. You can become spiritually exhausted by living a life that no longer belongs to you. That is why you must occasionally ask yourself, am I tired because the journey is difficult? Or am I tired because I am walking in the wrong direction? Those are not the same thing. Sometimes the answer is rest. Sometimes the answer is a new strategy. Sometimes the answer is to leave. Sometimes the answer is to begin again. And sometimes the answer is simply, keep going. Never giving up requires wisdom. If a door will not open, perhaps you need a key. If the key does not work, perhaps you need another door. If the entire building is wrong, perhaps you need to walk away. But do not confuse changing the method with abandoning the mission. The person who says, I will never give up, is not promising to repeat the same mistake forever. They are promising that their spirit will not surrender. That is different. Maybe you tried one career. Maybe it failed. Try another. Maybe you built one business. Maybe it collapsed. Build again, but wiser. Maybe you loved someone and the relationship ended. Heal, learn. And when you are ready, love again. Maybe you failed an exam. Study differently. Ask for help, try again. Maybe you made a terrible mistake. Take responsibility. Make amends where possible. Learn. Then stand up. You are allowed to begin again. Do you hear me? You are allowed to begin again. Your past is evidence of where you have been. It is not a life sentence for where you must go. There are people who are living inside old versions of themselves because they believe their history has already decided their future. It has not. You are not your worst mistake. You are not your lowest moment. You are not the rejection letter. You are not the failed business. You are not the broken relationship. You are not the opportunity you missed. You are not the opinion someone formed about you when they saw only one chapter. You are still becoming. And as long as you are becoming, the story is not finished. There is still a page to write. There is still a conversation to have. There is still a skill to learn. There is still a wound to heal. There is still a mountain to climb. There is still a person you have not yet become. Do not bury that person, because the present version of your life is difficult. Think about the elderly person looking back over an entire lifetime. What do you think they regret most? Not every failure, not every embarrassing moment, not every rejection. Often, people regret the chances they never took, the words they never said, the dreams they never pursued, the courage they postponed, the life they kept waiting to begin. Do not wait forever. There will never be a perfect moment. There will always be another reason to delay. More money, more knowledge, more confidence, more time, more approval. But eventually you have to say, I will begin with what I have. I will become who I can become. I will take the next step. And maybe that step is tiny. That is okay. A small step taken consistently can become a completely different life. 1 page a day becomes a book. 1 workout becomes a stronger body. 1 honest conversation can repair a relationship. 1 hour of focused work can become a skill. 1 courageous decision can change an entire future. Never underestimate small acts repeated with conviction. Mountains are climbed 1 step at a time. Nobody jumps to the summit. And yet we look at successful people and imagine their success happened in 1 dramatic moment. We see the championship. We do not see the years of training. We see the finished company. We do not see the nights of doubt. We see the confident speaker. We do not see the thousands of moments when they struggled to find their voice. We see the harvest. We do not see the seasons when the farmer was planting in faith. So stop comparing your chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 20. Stop comparing your private struggle to someone else's public victory. You do not know what they survived to become who they are. And they do not know what you are surviving to become who you will be. Your timeline is your timeline. Your path is your path. Your transformation has its own rhythm. There is no shame in taking longer. There is no shame in starting over. There is no shame in asking for help. There is no shame in resting. There is no shame in changing direction. The only shame would be allowing fear to convince you that your life is already over when there is still life inside you. And if you are listening to me right now while secretly feeling exhausted, I want you to know something. You do not have to conquer your entire life tonight. You do not have to solve everything. You do not have to become extraordinary tomorrow morning. Just do not quit on yourself today. That is enough. Get through to today. Then tomorrow, do the same. Sometimes courage is not a grand gesture. Sometimes courage is brushing your teeth, going to work, making the call, opening the book, writing the page, sending the application, apologizing, starting again, taking the walk, getting back into the room, trying one more time. These ordinary acts can become sacred when they are performed in defiance of despair. And one day, you will look backward. You will remember the moment when you almost gave up, and you will realize that was not the end. That was the turning point. You will realize that the person who cried in the darkness was not weak. That person was preparing to become stronger. You will realize that the unanswered prayers taught you patience. The rejection taught you resilience. The betrayal taught you discernment. The failure taught you humility. The loneliness taught you self-knowledge. The uncertainty taught you faith. The struggle taught you strength. And suddenly, The chapters you wanted to erase will become the chapters that explain your character. This does not mean you should romanticize suffering. Pain is painful. Loss is loss. Failure hurts. Breathe, believe, begin again, and keep going. Always keep going.